Good afternoon and welcome to all of you for the Women's Day celebrations. We are privileged to have with us through WebEx Professor Sharada Srinivasan as our chief guest and Dr. Pratibha Jolly as guest of honor on this occasion and to deliver the Women's Day lectures. Welcome to the program, ma'am. We will start the program with an invocation by our Women's Day committee member, Dr. Vanaja.
गायति वनमाली मधुरं गायति वनमाली मधुरं गायति वनमाली.
Let him, he will sit here. यार उधर मत रहो.
पुष्प सुगंध सुमलय समीरे पुष्प सुगंध सुमलय समीरे पावन मुनिजन यमुना तीरे पावन मुनिजन यमुना तीरे गायति वनमाली मधुरं गायति वनमाली मधुरं गायति वनमाली मधुरं गायति वनमाली. परमहंस हृदयोत्सविहारी परमहंस हृदयोत्सविहारी परिपूर्णित मुरलीरवधारी परमहंस हृदयोत्सविहारी परिपूर्णित मुरलीरवधारी गायति वनमाली मधुरं गायति वनमाली मधुरं गायति वनमाली मधुरं गायति वनमाली गायति वनमाली गायति वनमाली.
Thank you, madam, for rendering a melodious song. I request Dr. Anjana Jain, Chairperson, Women's Day Celebrations Committee, to formally welcome the guests and the gathering.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Good afternoon, everybody. On this International Women's Day, I welcome all of you, men and women, to honor and celebrate the contribution and achievements of women in all our life. Over the past few decades, we have seen women has contributed immensely towards the growth of the country. On this International Women's Day, let us recognize the importance of their efforts. There was a time when women was confined to their houses. Society didn't allow them to step out of their houses. They were not even allowed to vote. Household chores were the only area of the work. It was the warriors of 19th century who fought for women's right to vote and work. One of the warriors, Raja Ram Mohan Rai, who abolished the Sati Pratha, where a woman has to die along with her husband in pyre. If we look into the education part, it was Savitri Bai Phule who fought for women's education in late 19th century. We must salute the courage of Shrimati Kadambini Ganguly and Anandibai Joshi, who overcame the societal orthodox to become the first two physicians in India and entire British Empire who were trained in Western medicine. Our presence and reality today is an outcome of their fight throughout our lives. These stories and many more showcase the capability and necessity of women to advance humanity in all aspects, especially science and technology. As told by Dr. Thomas, woman has no gender. Science has no gender. And she has devoted all her life to fulfill this four-word phrase. Today, society has seen a lot of changes. Present generation values women and trusts them with amazing responsibilities. Women are given equal opportunities at work and are allowed to stand among and sometimes ahead of men in many fields. They are indeed making the world turn heads towards them. One can see women reaching greater heights and even traveling to space. We should respect women not because of the gender but for their own identity. We have to accept that both men and women contribute equally towards the betterment of the family as well as society. Empowering women is not a responsibility, it is indeed a necessity. I'm proud to announce that we are going to felicitate 7 women of NAL who have contributed immensely to the success of NAL and will be superannuating this year. NAL is involved in several prestigious projects and I wish each and every one of us come forward to take this organization at the higher heights, especially women. The change has already begun and we will make it happen. In closing, I have to express my gratitude to all the men and women who played an integral role in inspiring my work in the world of smart materials and crystallography. I am blessed to have a family who has supported me at each step of my life. My work sought a lot of inspiration from Pierre Curie, one of the crystallographers who has got the Nobel Prize in 1903 for advancement of science and technology. He also mentioned it was not possible without the companionship of his wife, Marie Curie. So, on this International Women's Day, let us recognize the importance of women in our lives and to the society and motivate them for greater future achievements. Today, we have 2 women achievers with us, Professor Sharada Srinivasan, who is a Padmashri awardee, one of the highest civilian award in the field of archaeology. Welcome, Professor Sharada. Another distinguished professor who is with us today is Dr. Pratibha, who is currently leading a pilot project for DST titled Gati, Gender Advancement for Transforming Institution. She is working to promote gender equity in STEM disciplines. I would like to express my gratitude to the director NL, who has taken a keen interest to further the cause of gender equality in science and technology at NL. Before I end, I will read few lines for all the women in the audience. सागर के तट का रेत हूं मैं, सागर के तट का रेत हूं मैं, ढलते सूरज की लाली हूं, ढलते सूरज की लाली हूं, कमजोर नहीं हूं, कमजोर नहीं हूं, नारी हूं, मैं पेट पालने वाली हूं, पंजे से लेकर चोटी तक, पंजे से लेकर चोटी तक, काबिल सारी की सारी हूं, काबिल सारी की सारी हूं. Thank you so much.
I request Dr. Vanaja to introduce Professor Sharada Srinivasan to the audience, please.
It's my great pleasure to introduce today's our chief guest, Padmashri Professor Sharada Srinivasan. She is currently working at National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bengaluru. She has done her BTech in Engineering Physics from IIT Bombay and MA from School of Oriental and African Studies in London. She has received her PhD from the Institute of Archaeology from the University College of London for her studies on archaeometallurgy of South Indian branches. She was at Indian Institute of Sciences, Bengaluru, and during 1996 and 98 after her PhD as a Homi Baba Fellowship. She has got several awards, including Malati B. Nagar Ethno-Archaeology Award, Material Research Society of India MRSI Medal in the year 2006, Certificate of Excellence from Indian Institute of Metals in the year 2007, and the most prestigious Dr. Kalpana Chawla Young Woman Scientist Award for the year 2011. She has authored the book titled India's Legendary Roots, and she has also co-authored for the book Ecstasy of Classical Art, the branch catalogue of National Museum, Delhi. She is also a co-editor for Digital Hampi, which is a product of digital exploration into the art and architecture of Hampi. She has made pioneering contributions to the study of archaeology and the history of art from this perspective of exploring the engineering applications in these disciplines. Professor Sharada has made significant contributions to archaeometric characterizations of bronzes of South India using lead isotope analysis and archaeometallurgical studies on ancient mining and metallurgy in southern India. She has also been accomplished exponent of the classical dance form of Bharatanatyam and has given numerous lecture demonstrations on the artistic and scientific perspectives on the Soda Nataraja branch at international museums such as Royal Academy of Arts, London, and with a photo exhibition on the theme at Space City, Prague. For these excellent contributions, she was recognized, and in the year 2019, she has received the Padmashri in Archaeology, the fourth highest civilian award from the Government of India. Professor Sharada Srinivasan is a Fellow of Royal Asiatic Society of Great Britain and World Academy of Art and Science. She is also a member of Advisory Board of University of Exeter and member of Institute of Archaeometallurgical Studies, London. With this brief introduction, I once again invite Professor Padmashri Sharada Srinivasan for the International Women's Day celebration at CSR NAL Bengaluru. Thank you, Madam. You are most welcome.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. And let me say that it's a great privilege for me to be here. And thank you so much for this very prestigious invitation to give this keynote for the Women's Day celebration of CSR NAL. And let me also take this opportunity to congratulate CSR NAL on the excellent activities, and I have actually visited there and so on, and I'm aware of the many wonderful women also involved in research in many ways, and also CSIR in general, and also under the very able directorship of Dr. Ranjana Agarwal herself and so on. So it is, I think, really, I should really congratulate CSR on all the various kinds of gender sensitization in various ways that it has been also engaged in. Well, of course, Women's Day is a topic that is, I think, very close to the hearts of many of us as professional women. And let me also say it's a great privilege to be here with such an eminent personality as Pratibha Joliji from who is with Miranda House and has herself inspired and motivated so much of the younger generation of women. So, well, as pointed out, the significance of the International Women's Day goes back to the 19 period, that very tumultuous time between 1910 and 1914 and so on, where a lot of the women were struggling for their rights to vote, and also there was a connection with the labor, women in the labor force and so on. So we are reaping a lot of benefits of the activism of those times. And of course, in India, we have had very many eminent women also who've made very pioneering contributions. And of course, I should say also in these times where we are now having all these web-based interactions, one should also remember that in these COVID times, there are, apart from the whole nursing and medical fraternity across the country, a large part of it, which is also comprised of women, are doing an amazing job, including from some states such as perhaps Kerala, which have had a very high proportion of women in nursing and so on, but also the ASHA workers who have been going around collecting information on doing the contact tracing and so on across the country. So we really owe a great debt to many of these silent workers, or maybe who are not in that kind of positions of prominence. And of course, last year one can't help but recollecting also because it's a very pioneering contributions of Dr. V. Shanta, who was a leading oncologist and chairperson of the Adyar Cancer Research Institute. And she, of course, also came from a very eminent family of scientists, including of C.V. Raman and Dr. Chandrasekhar and so on, and worked in a very quiet and unassuming way, which also points to the fact that though somehow we know a lot about, the celebrities and the actors and the actresses, there are so many women who are working away very silently without, away from that kind of publicity, who also need to be recognized. And I think as scientists, we sometimes feel that, in these kinds of professions that, they ought to also be more of media attention and all these kinds of professions. And of course, we know of Dr. Shanta's very amazing contributions in towards the Adyar Cancer Research Institute and the mission of studying the spread of the disease and so on. And of course, one is also reminded because her work was also built along with the work of late Muthulakshmi Reddy, another great pioneer in the pre-independence era, who was one of the earliest, who was in fact the first woman to get into a men's college in Chennai. And she was a medical practitioner and also a great social reformer in many ways. And she was appointed to the Madras Legislative Council in 1926 and also undertook to correct many of the societal problems and so on, and set up homes for women, for the rescue of women and such like. And she was also, of course, involved with the Cancer Relief Fund and all that, which was also part of the legacy that Dr. Shanta built on. And I also mentioned it because, I think in our journeys, of course, our family plays such a big role in our mentorship and the sense of who we are. And so those of us who may have been lucky enough to have that kind of family support also need to pass on this message. And I should also mention that my great-grandfather, Dr. C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer, who was Diwan of Travancore in his time, and he was a great legal personality. So he was also one of the people who encouraged Dr. Muthulakshmi Reddy towards some of the, her activism and such like, and in those days. So, and he was also one of the great champions of getting women more representation in the legal establishment and counselors and so on, going back to the pre-independence era. And he was also, in fact, of course, very well known also for the Temple Entry Act of, getting the Dalits and lower classes into the temples, into Travancore and all, which was very revolutionary and also inspired, and also a lot of the other, the great personalities of our countries, Gandhi and so on, also acclaimed those actions and such like. And while we're, of course, on the subject of Travancore, and of course, he was also responsible for, primary education for women and so on. There's a lot of the Kerala strengths, in terms of moving ahead as it has, also goes back to some of these early actions and things like that. And there have been other great scientists such as Janaki Amand, who's a great botanist and so on. So I think it's important for us to go back also and to trace in our own times some of these contributions and archive them. Also because we can see how that has in our own lives maybe served to motivate us. And I should also mention there that in my case, I was also very lucky because my father, who's a former atomic energy chairman, he used to actually take me along to the plants, the power plants, like, at the time when he was, we were living in Kalpakkam and the nuclear power plant was coming there. And he used to explain to me these various parts. This is the calandria, and these are the turbines, and this is what happens when you have, the chain reaction of nuclear fission and fusion. So those kinds of things become very, they really impress us very deeply. And then, of course, some of my aunts living in Bangalore also were leading scientists with the Agricultural University and so on, from my father's side. So I think those of us who've been fortunate to have that kind of very forward-looking mindset also need to pass the baton on. And there's no doubt when we look at across the world, and also particularly in India, wherever there is a greater patriarchy, then even the developmental indices are less, because it's only when the women are educated that they can then pass on, the motivation to the next generation and so on. So there is a relationship there between how, the development of women and education and so on, which is why we need to, each of us, do our bits and so on. And in fact, when I got into IIT, 30 years ago and so on. So that was, at that time, it was a 1 in 20 ratio. So it was something which, to me, it seemed natural because a lot of my family had, of course, a lot of outward-looking background. But when you're really out there and you realize that it is, there are a lot of other aspects that, come to your attention then of the, I'm sure and nowadays there have been so many ways of trying to minimize the aspects to do with abuse and so on of women and so on. So these are things which need to, I think, be sensitized even as at a younger level. And when it comes to the professional challenges and so on, because very early on I was also getting into the act of exploring the ancient mining and metallurgy, and I was undertaking field trips and so on, and going out and exploring, early mining sites. And in that, again, my mother played a very big role because she was quite adventurous, and then she used to take me along. We went on a long pilgrimage or trek or whatever to Amarnath in the Himalayas, and so she had that great sense of. She was also a chairperson of the World Wildlife Fund and so on. So, but I remember, for instance, when I wrote a letter to some mining company that I would like to visit, they automatically replied saying, yes, Mr. So-and-so, because, we all go through this where initially a lot of people assume that we are men, because why would women want to be doing these kinds of obscure things like traveling to mines and so on. So I used to find that they would get a little surprised, in the time when I was doing my PhD and all that, and I wanted to travel to these remote places and so on. So there are these kinds of hidden aspects, I suppose, that we have to countenance, and that's why we need to, I think that the role that we play as women in mentoring and forming a support group is still very relevant. In fact, when I was telling a colleague about this, a male colleague, just saying I'm busy because I'm giving a couple of talks at Women's Day, and he was just jokingly saying, but is there really, do we really need it? Because women are doing well and they are coming up and so on. And of course, we realize the challenges, but, what purpose does it serve? So I think sometimes, that's also partly because maybe in our cocoon of a more privileged educated milieu, or the, the upper class milieu and all that, we may take it for granted, but the fact is that there is still a lot of inequalities, a lot of gender inequalities, and even if it might just seem like a ritual, it is very important in terms of communicating to the larger, the wider community of women, of that, that there is a support group. And I think the sensitization it should not just be about women talking to women about sensitizing themselves, and men have to be sensitized as well. You know, the sensitization has to include men, because that is also where some of the problem lies, because sometimes there is a sense of entitlement, you know, in men since you know, the younger days and so on. And those are kinds of notions that need to actually be examined, you know, in the younger days, when they can actually correct those rather than tell when it gets ossified. So the sensitization actually also needs to be directed at men in some ways. And that's why, in fact, NIAS has had over several years quite a entrenched program where, you know, they have these seminars which are about gender perspectives and so on, where, you know, men are also asked to sit in so that they can also hear about this and also, you know, broaden the horizons, as it were. And so, of course, as I said, there are those various aspects of mentoring. And the other aspect that I, of course, engage in my own work, which has been to do with, of course, the applications of scientific methods in art and archaeology. So actually, while I was going through this, you know, this professional experience as a laboratory scientist, I suddenly began to feel that I didn't really want to be confined only to a lab and working in that way, because, and I think in a way, that way, science and technology, I mean, in Western science, it's a very, it's a very gender neutral space, which can be a bit disturbing. I feel it needs to be engendered more, because when you're actually dealing with science and society issues and you're traveling out there and so on, you see much more complex realities. You see, you know, the human dimension, the human condition, and you engage with all that. Otherwise, you would just be looking at your equations and so on, and not perhaps concerning yourselves with the actual problems, you know, immediately outside, you know, your problems, whether it's to do with pollution or environment or, you know, so many of these kinds of issues. And in that sense, also, I was also influenced quite a bit by one of my uncles, Dr. C.V. Seshadri, who worked a lot with appropriate technologies for rural development and all that. And he would keep telling me, you should really travel out there and study the small scale, you know, cottage industries and crafts and so on, and see where the interventions could, you know, come in. And he was also working with rural women to train them how to grow the spirulina algae, which could, you know, improve their nutrition as a nutrition supplement. And this was when he was working in the Murugapati Chettiar Research Center in Chennai, and he was traveling around with these, training these rural women in these ways. And so that's how I got also interested in using, of course, the technical analysis and the spectrochemical analysis to study the art historical objects and archaeological objects. For instance, I've tried to use lead isotope analysis, which also looks at the lead isotope ratios to identify the ore sources of the Chola bronzes and the Nataraja bronzes and so on. But also then looking at some of the traditional crafts and, you know, the surviving traditions of metal crafts and so on. And one of the things that I found very inspiring in my own journey, of course, is that when we look back at our past, in a way, I think we do have this stereotypical notion. And I think in archaeology now, there's a lot of re-examination in terms of the role of gender and so on. And when we look back on it, it's not as if everything was really all being done by the men. Women played very prominent roles too. And in fact, in my own work on the Chola bronzes, one of the most amazing personalities really was this 10th century Chola queen, Sembian Mahadevi, who was one of the first to really patronize the Nataraja bronzes. And one of the inscriptions in the Ardithurai temple mentions that she, you know, had a community of the Kamala or bronze workers who were living there. And she was also, there was a town named after her called Sembian Mahadevi, which is still there. So she was, you know, that prominent a personality. And she was widowed, so she was held in very high regard because her husband Gandharaditya Chola, you know, he fasted unto death as a devotee of Shiva, but she went on to live very long and to patronize a lot of temples and all. So even this notion that there was, you know, sati was only being, was with the fate of the women, you know, that's not universally true. There were women out there who were changing the narrative and setting, you know, their own legacy of historical records and things like that, inscriptions and so on. And we need to also remember this. And, and another example, of course, is the spectacular, now that's also UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Rani Ki Vav, which was constructed under the patronage of Solanki Queen in Gujarat. And there are other examples. There is the Itmat-ud-Daula in Agra, which was built by Noor Jahan in the memory of her father, and so on. So, and of course, yes, so I suppose in the aristocratic, and it wasn't only that, there were nuns, for instance, in the Shatavahana period, there were nuns who were, Buddhist nuns who were, also actively donating and patronizing parts of the stupa and so on. The dancers, the Nachiyar and Devadasis also played a big role and so on. So it's a much more complex history, and I think that also becomes quite interesting and exciting. And also even in the current day, I think for me, what is very interesting when I study the crafts and so on is to also look at, the contributions of the women are. And one very interesting aspect is that traditionally, maybe some of the crafts, maybe it was the master craftsmen who were, some of them were male and so on. But of course, the women, like for instance, I've been documenting this mirror making tradition in Kerala, the Aranmula mirror making, which uses a bronze of a very high composition of tin, of 33% tin, which they make in a very sophisticated way. And the master craftsman, of course, Janardhan Acharya, he may have been male, but his wife would be at the bellows, and so the women were also partaking because it was like a household activity. So there was a contribution from the women as well. I mean, maybe not at all this thing, but certainly in several. And there are also, for instance, many blacksmiths, the women blacksmiths that I've seen in Bellary and so on, even a pregnant blacksmith who was hammering away and things. So there are a lot of things when you travel out there which surprise you that the women were actually very proactive and contributing. And the interesting thing is, of course, is that once the master craftsmen have passed away, quite often it's the women who've taken over some of these workshops. Like now, this Janardhan Acharya's daughter is the one who's really doing, working more actively with the mirror making tradition in Aranmula and so on. So there is, I think, a lot of work to be done there in terms of, putting together all these complex histories and putting them across also in a way that could inspire and engage with the next generation, and the way we also, a more conscious way in which we draw it within our pedagogy as well. For instance, your own archiving at CISR, I think that's an important part also that ought to be available for us to know. And, these, as you've mentioned, very significant contributions and so on, because that's the way that we can actually pass on the baton to the next generation. And I think I've spoken for quite a long time now, almost. And of course, it's one of those topics that we always feel very passionate about. So there is so much that we could, we would still want to talk about. And I think, of course, the other very important aspect is even in NIAS and so on, that, looking at, abuse and exploitation and so on. And that's, and apart from the need to also shatter the glass ceiling and to celebrate the cases of shattering of the glass ceiling. And it's wonderful that more and more women are now being seen in these leadership roles in the scientific community as well, because we have had maybe a perception, in the STEM disciplines that, the women have can only go so far. And you've had cases where there are, women are actually doing very well in the STEM disciplines when it comes to the exams and so on. Often it's the women who are the toppers and so on that we're seeing in Bangalore, and for instance, quite often the toppers in a lot of the science and maths and so on tend to be women. But then later on, there is a dropout rate. The women don't, it's only later when you come up to the master's, PhD and so on, then you see less and less of them, because maybe, due to factors such as marriage and so on, and how to make, we need to consciously make sure that we employ women and promote women, and also citation. I think that's a very important aspect also, where we're publishing and writing, because there is a tendency, perhaps there has been, that, the well-known male academics, they get to be seen as the established figures and they get cited and this and that. And, a lot of the women, sometimes they don't get cited, and there is a certain kind of erasure in that sense. So we need to consciously reach out and make sure that we encourage women in the various ways that we can. So thank you very much, and very best wishes to you.
Thank you very much, madam, for sharing your views. I now request Dr. Meenu Srivastava, Women's Day Celebrations Committee member, to introduce the guest of honor, Dr. Pratibha Jolly, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my privilege to introduce guest of honor, Dr. Pratibha Jolly. Dr. Pratibha Jolly served as principal, Miranda House, a premier college for women at University of Delhi, a post she held for 14 years till February 2019. Under her dynamic leadership, Miranda House received All India Rank 1 under National Institutional Ranking Framework for 4 successive years from 2017 to 2020. Dr. Jolly has been conferred the International Commission on Physics Education Medal, ICPE, in 2020 in recognition of her contributions to physics education with international outreach. A rare honor, she chaired ICPE for 6 years. She is passionate about early adoption of new technologies, promoting project-based learning, capacity building of women in science and leadership roles, and helping students build successful careers. Dr. Jolly is a fellow of National Academy of Sciences, India, and Institute of Physics, UK. Currently, she is with NAC as academic consultant. She has long association with the Department of Science and Technology, and currently she is leading the Department of Science and Technology, a pilot project titled Gati, Gender Advancement for Transforming Institutions, for promoting gender equity in STEM disciplines. With this brief introduction, I would like to welcome Dr. Pratibha Jolly.
Thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be speaking at NAL, because I've always held the women in National Aeronautical Labs as role models. These are the rarefied areas. And now also I'm very happy that I've had a chance today to hear Professor Sharada Srinivasan. Grateful thanks to Director Dr. Sharada and congratulations to all that you will be celebrating today on the occasion of the International Women's Day. Going by the number of institutions that today are celebrating this, and I've been giving talks since morning, I think that women have arrived in a sense that they're making their presence felt. But it's very sad to see that there are not enough men who are also joining the journey or celebrating on the same day. So I will share a few slides and as I go along, and let me just see if you get my screen. Are you able to see my screen now? Are you with me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, yes.
Yeah, so sorry. Well, largely that's because I like to paint my thoughts on a canvas. And right now it is a PowerPoint slides, and it is really a story. And so don't really go by what's written on it. And it's just the photographs or the pictures are the ones that would essentially put together my thoughts. So I do want to talk today about, the women and the various roles that they play and our systems. And as has been said, my current passion happens to be Gati. And being in a women's institution for very long, having gone to all women's school, college, Banana House also being my alma mater, and leading it, I do think one has insight into how things now need to really, really change and forward rather quickly. So I'd like to dedicate this talk and give a tribute to the women scientists on the forefront. And it is not just a coincidence that all the vaccines that are out there now saving our lives, the women have led those programs, be it Dr. Sumati from Bharat Biotech for Covaxin, or the Oxford AstraZeneca, Sarah Gilbert, or Kathleen Carrico with the Pfizer, and she is really a front runner for getting the Nobel for 2021 with the first mRNA vaccine, or it be Neeta Patel with Novavax, working in the US, the Sputnik 5, again having been led by a woman, and Kezemeka Kobat, who Dr. Fauci has publicly acknowledged as having led the Moderna initiative, and a woman of color. And we do know what are the kind of problems that women do face in leadership roles and on the frontiers. And so, I mean, this is fantastic that the COVID fight has really had these women leading the research initiatives. Now, I always do treasure this particular fresco, which is adorns the gates of, the Greece University, which depicts the sciences as the women, be it medicine, theology, astronomy, physics, and yet here we are after that many decades, or actually throughout the journey of humankind, that are we just frescoes which will adorn gateways, or are we going to be living, thriving, vibrant lives in the field of science? So that is the question that always does remain. And the gestalt is there, whether I talk of the scientist, the tinkerer, the innovator, or entrepreneur. Successful scientists and successful entrepreneurs have always shared many traits, attitudes, and skills. That's because basic science underpins technological innovations. So these boundaries that ISRO women or DAE women are doing rather well, and this is a rarefied space when we talk of the premier research institution, this is something as an educationist which really worries me, because my girls are going to carve a very successful life, and it has to be seamlessly integrated across various skill sectors. So as we go along, I do always think that women are born entrepreneurs. We know that Indian music does not have does not play to a score or a written script, and so too when we craft beautiful be it your saris or other things, that the loom does not also have a written script. So here we have women who come up with the most brilliant and complex repetitive patterns, and we do not look at them as those who are programming or that they have algorithmic thinking. Or when we look at the Ima Kethal Manipur market, the world's largest women's market, which is about 500 years old, has nearly 4,000 women traders. The entrepreneurial skills are very much on the show. And this is the kind of ability that is unsung. We never look at the smart native talent of our large population as scientifically driven, because formal learning is what is defined as, as part of enterprise education, or be it formal research. And if we look at that today, the new generation is certainly changing many stereotypes, and they are changing the goalposts, because there's a large number that is coming up and trying to find an equal footing in today's world. And this is the new generation equality that we should be talking about, and not really of all that rarefied space that has been created in our institutions, because very soon the tipping point would be with us, and we would be subverting those old practices. This year's language has to have a new voice. It has to have a new discourse. And this is something I deeply believe in, even though we are very firmly aware of all those, the fuzzy areas and the gray areas, and how difficult it is to carve a successful life in the world, which is as competitive as science happens to be. So I would also like to weave in my personal story. It is an institution where I studied and where I went back, to lead it. And I never thought that I would be the one that would spend such a long time in just looking at the legacy that I'd inherited, the legacy of excellence and the ups and downs in the journey of the institution. Because when I joined as a student, my classes were held in the university, this institution having been set in the Oxford tradition. And I thought, well, that's a cloister where we actually come in only to have fun, what were called as subsidiary classes, or, all the extramural activities and so on. And I never thought that I would go back into those portals and be actually caught there. So as I was leading Miranda House, I felt that here was an institution that was part of my life, but it had also never been a part of my life because it had porous boundaries. And I had to uphold the stakeholder expectations, decode a legacy of an institution that had been premier, but had lost its rankings and was actually on a very, very much downward hill. I had to overcome many challenges and create growth opportunities, not for myself, but for the community that I had come back to befriend and to work with. And with small incremental changes, I never knew when I look back that we had made hugely disruptive innovations and transformed the entire ecosystem. The challenge was to build a community of practice and establish distinctive institutional values for a new age. And while upholding the legacy and its premier status, completely redefine how things were happening within that institution. So project by project, brick by brick, engendering change and transforming ecosystem was a task that befell on me. We all know that a liberal college has many, many strengths, and Miranda certainly had that. It had an advantage of being it has the advantage of being on the university campus, and a very strong historical emphasis on almost an institutional legacy, on discussion and debate, on developing soft skills, nurturing individual talent and celebrating diversity, and also developing collaboration and teamwork. Engagement with the real world problems and engagement with the community before these words became common in discourse, before these words became fashionable, before inclusivity and celebrating diversity became very fashionable. We were there. We were doing it, and we were talking about it, and we were actively changing societal norms with it. Obviously, there was a strong emphasis on dance, drama, music, and the performing arts. And under these circumstances, it is no surprise that our alumni are the who's who list of the country and also globally. And if you look at Sheila Dikshit, the 3-time Chief Minister or Speaker of the Parliament, Meera Nair, Anita Desai, Meera Nair, Hollywood producer and woman of many parts, Nandita Das or Anjali Ila Menon, Beena Agarwal or again Shovna. So each one of them has raised the bar and they need to be celebrated. But if you look at the body of work of these individuals, it goes beyond the stereotypes. If you look at Meera Nair's work, each of these books is, her films is distinctive, going from Salam Bombay, not stopping just at the film, but setting up a trust for street children and coming to Reluctant Fundamentalist, part of which was shot at Miranda House. Each of these needs to be celebrated. Or if you look at the work of a younger alumna, Shonali Bose, tackling extremely complex subjects such as Margarita with the Straw or The Sky is Pink. So not just that they were breaking the glass ceiling, but that they were doing it with a heart. And that heart was engaging with complex issues with society. So that is the kind of spirit and the power women bring to any domain. And Miranda House has been on the frontiers on nurturing that. If we have had Padma Awards almost every year, these stand testimony to the kind of work women can do, or that institution can contribute to helping women find their bearing. But as I said, a woman with a voice is by definition a strong woman, but the search to find that voice can be remarkably different. And I do believe that helping women find that voice is where institutions can do a whole lot. And institutions with liberal anchorings are the ones that lead the way and they show the way. And that is what needs to be replicated in all institutions, be they those of research with very rarefied presence of women, or be those at undergraduate level where the feeder channel is nurtured. So if I speak of my own journey, as I said, I was a student and then I began teaching, and I did it with a whole lot of disdain because I always wanted to be a researcher, and I had my, like everybody else, your PhD, you go abroad, and I had my admissions and everything, but there was a mishap in the family, and I decided to stay back. And then when I began teaching, did my PhD here and began teaching, I was absolutely, I had lost faith in the classroom, and I did not like it because it was so bookish, it was so algorithmic. And that's when I said, if you don't like something, you got to change it. And I began informally a non-formal program funded by DST in those years in 1980s with 50,000 rupees, which was learning through investigative projects, giving flavor of research to undergraduates. And it became a mission in my life. And it just took over and changed the course of my life, because those have been the happiest moments. And therefore, project-based learning became pedagogical innovation. We developed very innovative, appropriate technology usages, going up to data acquisition labs. And it was such fun because one had subverted a traditional system. And then I got an opportunity, and for 14 years, I was at Department of Physics, but I still had that lab of my own for undergraduate students where they came, innovated, and published. So early research was something I was doing. And those heydays, I was just pulled out and asked by my vice chancellor to go take charge of a college I'd never heard the name of because it was in doldrums, didn't have a principal. They said, walk the talk, because you are innovating in education and you should go. And I thought, if somebody on the top asks you to do something, if you refuse, then you've lost your right to criticize the system. And so there I was, fools jump where angels fail to tread, and trial by fire, I became an administrator. And my God, did I learn? Yes, I did, because the role did not have to fit me. I was who I was, and I took it still as someone who likes to do a project and not in the stereotypical head of an institution. So it was interesting. And then Miranda House, that did not have a principal for 5 years, the post was vacated by whoever was on leave, and I was nudged to apply. And there I was, back in what I had thought might be a cloister, and from where I had flown out, not just to work with the Miranda students in a non-formal project-based learning program, but with coming back to walk the talk and to innovate in the college to be considered as a lab. And it was fun, because with this, with bringing back my expertise and my passion for science education, developing innovative labs, active learning, working with diverse student populations on capacity building programs, Miranda became a laboratory for sure. It also became a place where one could look at how ecosystems can be transformed. And there were several challenges because infrastructure had absolutely collapsed. So the beautiful Walter George red brick building, a heritage building, still looked beautiful, but the walls and the roof was collapsing. There was no boundary wall, there were no pathways. More importantly, there was a sense of complacency. We are the best, without having anything left to show for what it means to be the best. So we began from there. And my 14 years is a story of reinvention, brick by brick, project by project. But to cut it short, we rejuvenated things for the new millennium, but moved towards state-of-art infrastructure, recreated the future of the classroom, the interactive learning studios, and brought in a whole lot of international collaborations, brought in game-changing practices. And before it became fashionable to use IT in education, we had faculty start self-paced, self-driven adoption of technology with the netbook issued to all, and with peer and social learning. And this brought in an immense transformational change. So let us say that doing up the infrastructure, bringing in new pedagogical practices is one thing, but to keep up your legacy of activism and doing other things is equally important. So here are the students with the No Poster Party, which is not a political party, but where they would just go peel off all the graffiti and posters stuck on the walls and bring the paper back home to recycle in a beautiful paper recycling plant and so on and so forth. Or to have a clean campus and a green campus, learning anytime, anywhere, be a Shantiniketan, even if you have the very best of state-of-art infrastructure. So this is where the talent nurturing was very, very important, but it was with a heart. It's a college that you fall in love with. And that about 20 odd films that have been shot there because it is a cinematographer's delight. And here was Meghna Gulzar, who wanted to shoot for Razi. And I told her, my girls will even on a TV program say, oh, we love sitting under the tree and talking to the squirrels or, with the cats of Miranda House. And lo and behold, the first scene of Razi is of Alia Bhatt saving a squirrel that is going to be run over by a car. And this is a scene shot in the college. So having a heart, even as you move forward, is important because institutions have to be loved. And the famous cats of Miranda House, therefore, how easy to fall in love with your whole institution or to create an atmosphere that you love is most important. And that is a legacy one has to leave. And at the same time, you have to nudge students to bridge their bridge the aspirational gap, because this new generation, to the millennium born, to internet born, digital era, have to move beyond micro hopes and micro ambitions. They have to innovate, not just on a micro scale, not look at just micro ventures. They have to move from the low tech to the high tech. And so understanding early that the world is changing, where the world is going to be 10 years later, allows you to be on the leading edge of the curve. And that's most important for women, because women lose out frequently by being left behind as the world moves ahead on technology front. So to break the glass ceiling, much is needed also for skill enhancement and for developing that confidence that, yes, I'm right there and I'm an equal partner in change, in transformation, in innovation, and in research. So it is with that kind of a mission that, yes, the college regained its excellence and sustained it, keeping its institutional values, the human heart ticking and alive, and a vibrant innovation where everybody really was a partner. And that has not been an easy journey at all, because building a community of practice is one of the most difficult things that can anytime happen, and it's important. But yes, there were changing times and changing goals. One had to realize that we were moving to digitization. So we were one of the earliest adopters in colleges of digital technologies, in our laboratories, even in social sciences and humanities. And we understood that there are new ways of knowing and learning and sharing new skills and new instruments. And that is what needed to be leveraged. So it was obviously the SDGs were very important, and I had them plastered on a big red brick wall, and a student would run and say, I have to tell you something. I said, I'm really running to do something. I said, run with me. And then she would say, you know what, I've decided to devote my life to SDG number this. And so that is the passion for changing the world that women bring, and that needs to be nurtured. But it's important equally to see the disruptive changes that are happening and the transformative practices. And the new jobs are certainly going to be with machine learning, AI, and intersection of AI, ML, and IoT. And importantly, also ethics as we move exceedingly to more automated practices. So looking at the demography of the startups that are now coming up, it's really bad that there's just less than 10% that are women. And we have to nudge our students also towards finding the confidence and finding the niche to do that. Because, and many of our students, alumni from 1948 have been social entrepreneurs. They have the skills and they also are technology leaders. So, but it's not about one institution. It is about the women population across across the globe that much needs to be done. And there is, of course, the nurturing from the government happening. But what I really today want to talk about is this Moonshot Generation, which is really into thinking very differently. And we have to stand by them and nudge them to move forward. They are thinking now of global challenges. They're challenging the status quo. They're ideating radical, finding new paths to solutions, and nothing is science fiction. Anything is possible for them, and women included. They leapfrog to the disruptive change, the 10x. I'd love to introduce to you today Anika Cheburulu, Texas, 14 years, winning $25,000 3M Young Scientist Challenge Award for researching a molecule that can selectively bind to spike protein or SARS-CoV virus to find a cure for COVID-19. So not just those 6 women who led the vaccine development, but young students who are really looking at problems that touch their heart. We have to foster the next generation of science leaders. Or look at Gitanjali Rao, a serial innovator and techpreneur, featured on Time magazine, the Kid of the Year 2020, detecting lead content in water using nanotubes, detecting opioid addiction, detecting cyberbullying early. Oh my God, you name it. And these children are there, right up there. This is generation equality. And we should be talking about them and not lamenting what happened to my generation. And that is where our role is very well defined and important. Our teenpreneurs, Nikia Shamsher, quit path, early risk detection of oral cancer, 18 years, problem close to her heart. Or the current last month winner of the Iris National Fair India component, a team of 25 will be sending to US, and Jui Keska devising a wearable device for Parkinson's disease. So this is the generation we should talk about. But let me say, all students deserve this chance. And the Abdul Kalam Space Research Payload Cubes Challenge that recently launched 100 small sats had a team from Aurangabad Municipal Corporation School also send up this small sat cube, and this included 6 girls and 4 boys. So this is the world, this is the generation we should now be talking about. And our discourse, our language, our narrative must acquire a new voice. And that I do believe is the only voice that I at least have, and I've had it only, it has been with me since the day I was so bored with my classroom. I had no faith left in the traditional classroom, and I set up learning by doing in 1980s, lab of my own program. So the generation today celebrates Swati Mohan, the Mars mission, from curiosity to perseverance, and an achievement that takes you 50 years to have a successful remote and robotic exploration. And this is the work NAL scientists should be encouraging. This is the outreach that you should really be having a huge floor dedicated where these students can come and can be nurtured and they can be working on the frontiers. And so today it's no surprise that ISRO women are celebrated, and Leta Ambika is leading the new mission that is coming on, the Chandrayaan-3. But, I love Mitra, who's going to be the humanoid that will travel the unmanned as well as the manned mission. So why should not each of our schools have a Voima Mitra to play around with? Because she is who the children can connect with. And she is the one that they should be playing with rather than a Barbie doll. And she is the one they should be coding and programming to do many, many things. And that is the change that has to be brought about. That said, there are immense gender gaps on the frontiers of the new economy. If I talk about all the disruptive technology that has enabled very young students to code early and to do the kind of projects that I've spoken about, then we also need to look at what is happening to the share of the women. And the new WEF World Economic Forum report tells us that while women still are contributing a lot to people and culture jobs or content production, their share of professional jobs in data and artificial intelligence or engineering or cloud computing is a dismal less than 20%. So how can we therefore for the masses en masse transform the ecosystem of innovation? How can women be equal participants? Because one of some students will do well. They may be privileged, they may have families, or they may be living in areas where they can do well. But what about the large population that we want to nudge towards innovation? So they have to get ready for the jobs of the future, jobs of the tomorrow, for the VUCA world, the volatile, uncertain, ambiguous world. So they have to have have disruptive technology skills, because these are the this is where the emerging jobs are going to come. So our women have to be reskilled and upskilled. They have to overcome the gender gaps in key job clusters, and this task is not going to be simple, because where is the talent pool? If you look at the number of PhDs, it is in hard sciences, physics, computer science, engineering, less than 50%. Only life sciences, we are reaching gender parity. And while the girls are outperforming in schools, the numbers are large in undergraduate, postgraduate, by the time you move up the hierarchy, women are not there. And they need, therefore, to be nurtured, they need to be brought up, and it's no surprise. And actually it is that, I mean, we've had with many women who could have got the Nobel and did not get. Because if you look at physics, 4 out of 216 awards went to women. And medicine, if there was 12, chemistry was 7, which is a dismal less than 4%. And if physics has 4, that's because the Nobel opened its doors. And over the last 3 years, there were 2 women who got that award. And so, some catching up to do. And I hope that this trend continues in a big way. So the question remains, despite all the trailblazing examples I've given, can't women do science? So what is this contradiction that we are all the time battling with? Why do we have to prove ourselves again and again and again? How do we nurture the talent of our women, our girl students and women? For all that I have said, education is the hardest sector to reform and to reboot. And therein lies the challenge, and therein lies the solution. Further complicated, because as the country gets aspirational, an institution such as mine, the top college, is no longer elitist because it has people from the best families, educated families, coming to us, as happened in 1948. Today it is elitist because 70 to 80% students come from outside of Delhi, from remote areas of the country. Many are first generation learners, they have a language challenge and they have an economic challenge. The challenge has been for me a heartfelt effort to increase the bursary starting from zero. I had a huge corpus and I was supporting a large number of students personally and from institutional efforts so that they could be educated. And they would acquire, while remaining culturally rooted to their own families and areas, they would acquire and have a new identity laid on them. That would be the identity of being a Mirandian, a student of the top college. And in this changing demography, they are aspirational. So it is our task to have equity excellence as we expand and understand the organizational flux that is taking place and find and help the students to carve a new identity in the changing demographics. This is the face of the young students as they come in a Wi-Fi enabled campus, learning, studying everywhere. By the time they leave at the end of 3 years, you could mistake them for a Meera Nair or a Nandita Das or a Sheila Dixit, because that is the role an institution plays in their journey in nurturing their talent. And they acquire, just walking down the corridors that I showed you, a sense that I can do it too. And that is the kind of stuff legions are made of. And this is the exponential change these students will bring to the country, because the women in ISRO were not educated in the top IITs. They came from small places. And that is the cohort that is making a difference to the country. So let me therefore say that meeting the diversity and inclusion challenge is going to be very important for institutions. We have to develop a diversity quotient, a diversity intelligence. We have to give to all this population I'm talking about a sense of identity and belonging, a respect, and a sense of community. And they have to then develop a global perspective and also understand that the situation, the culture, the context matters. And creativity is to be rooted in all that, and societal problems have to be solved, and therefore empathy has to be developed in each of the students. So, as I said, if education advances one step at a time, we are going to fall exponentially behind the world for which we aim to prepare our learners. And so the role of institutions such as ours is extremely important because we are the feeder channel to great institutions such as NAL and others, and so on. So let me say, therefore, I think it's taking more time, so over the next 5 minutes should complete, that what works best in nurturing this talent for an equal world is project-based learning. And that is what has been the mission of my life. And it is this cognitive apprenticeship that matters. Just like a master craftsman or let us say a potter holds the hand of a novice and gives shape to an earthen pot, so too a good teacher models the process of solving problems for a student, demonstrates how something has to be shaped and approached. That coaching is important. The scaffolding is important. The reflective process is important so that you know what is the process of creating something new, of innovating, and how the student can, with metacognition, also debug what problems arise and then be launched to solve problems on her own. And that is the process of learning to learn, and institutions have to subvert those horribly linear benches and desks and let them give way to learning studios where project-based learning can become the norm, and less is more, and students can be contributors to an innovative, vibrant ecosystem where everybody knows that we have many grand challenges facing the world and we can all contribute and learn in that process. So unleashing institutional innovation requires today to have design thinking, and that is all that is going to be needed. That is tough, but that is what is going to be needed for training the next generation of innovators and entrepreneurs. They have to understand, explore, and have take problems to logical conclusion. And this process is not going to be easy. So you have to ideate, prototype, test, implement, and we do need a lot of handholding from all kinds of institutions, but it is truly rewarding because this is what we owe to the next generation of students, both boys and girls, but girls in particular, young women in particular. So knowledge has to be T-shaped now. It has to have both cross-disciplinary expertise and deep discipline expertise. We have to have the maker education, the maker lab, make things. You have to have a place-based learning because the culture of the place matters. Cognition is situated in the context. What is the context in which a problem is to be solved? And enterprise education must be woven into the system so that we are able to design different experiences and students can design their own education. If institutions don't do it now, the young generation is not going to wait, because with so much available now through freeware and so on, they will create their own paths to education and their own path, like they are the Moonshot Generation. Today, they are the ones who will form a company and land on Moon or Mars much before, just like Elon Musk's SpaceX, they will be there before institutional missions are successful. So women are pretty good at multitasking and unitasking. That is the nature of the new learning. They think fast, they think slow, they work together, they work alone. They can act global, they can act local. And we've all learned the meaning of living digital and living real. So women can be naturally, they have an advantage if they break the stereotype and they're nurtured and they develop a confidence that they can do it all. They have it in them to do it all. And the canvas for institutional mentoring is very large. This liberal education ecosystem is what all institutions, be they corporate organizations or be they private institutions or be they institutions such as NAL, they need to replicate. So you need to have, a huge deluge of seminars, conferences, workshops, and bring in young people. You need to have societies and clubs. You need to have coaching and training. You need to be able to sit behind the potter's wheel. You have a whole lot of extramural. I always used to say, I don't know why I always said when I was a child, when I am 40, I will sit behind the potter's wheel. 40 came, I did not. And 50 came, I still did not. 60 came, I did not. And now when I look back, I think I was always sitting behind the potter's wheel. Just the medium was not just earth. It was sometimes brick, sometimes it was mortar, sometimes it was electronic components, sometimes it was, other string and sticky tape objects, and sometimes it was far more sophisticated, high-end technologies. But we all have to be able to define our analogies and live to them. So let me say, and I will end at that, we have to create gender responsive environment. We have to engineer creative opportunities and experiential learning in context-rich problem solving. We have to, there's no point lamenting that there are not enough people out there. We have to nurture. We have to also develop a growth mindset and close the generational gap. So generational intelligence has to be there, just like diversity intelligence have to be there. Education should be hands-on, minds-on, and hearts-on. That said, why have I shown you the loom? Shown you the loom because crafting a life in science is like the weaving experience. The warp is like the institution, which scaffolds, which provides opportunities. The weft is the community for which it works. The students, the peers, the mentors, the community, and you enable and empower them to create their own algorithm, scripted or unscripted, to weave a tapestry and a pattern that is immensely creative and engaging. And that is what women do best, and that is what women need. And that is a learning organization where you learn collectively and network and build effective teams and help in career development. To do that, you need smart goals and action plans, which are specific, measurable, achievable, and time-bound. And with that, let me say, I'm truly privileged that I'm bringing together my learning of a lifetime and my project-based learning mission to launch Gati, Gender Advancement for Transforming Institutions, which is there for nudging institutions to catalyze gender equity. Now, to talk about details of Gati, maybe on another day, but thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share with you my learnings from a lifetime's mission of working with students, giving to them a lab of their own early enough, and for a vibrant innovation happening in their, and let me say in my life, because to build a community of practice is one of the most challenging, but one of the most satisfying experiences anyone can hope to have, especially if you are a mere educator. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam, for sharing your journey at Miranda House and your contribution to Miranda House. Hope there will be an exponential increase in women's contribution in research areas in near future. Thank you. I now request our director, Sri Jitendra J. Jadhav, to address the gathering.
Good afternoon to all. Professor Sharada Srinivasan, Padmashri awardee and distinguished professor at NIAS, Dr. Pratibha Jolly, ex-principal Miranda House. We have here Dr. Mutkavi, Head 4PI, Dr. Bhaumik, Dr. Manju Prasad, Srimati Malika Kumar, Srimati Jayanti, Srimati Lata Shri, Srimati Anjana Jain, all my other colleagues sitting here and also on to the virtual. For all of you, a very happy Women's Day, and I welcome all of you today for this celebration. Today we have two distinguished personalities, Professor Sharada Srinivasan and Dr. Pratibha Jolly, and we have listened to them that how Professor Sharada Srinivasan has taken her journey from going to the mines and mentoring this and then taking to the archometric characterization, and that was a very exciting journey which we heard from her. And we have one more very distinguished personality, Dr. Pratibha Jolly, which where the lecture was very practical to how to take it. Institute which was going down, and then she has taken project by project, brick by brick task management, and brought that institution up. And one of the good thing I liked is project based learning and how to do that. So what a fantastic lectures, both of you, madam. I must we are very privileged that you are with us. Probably we would have been more privileged if we were met in person and give the lecture into the whole audience. But definitely all our not even women scientists, but all our scientists must have inspired by, especially all of us are inspired by your lectures and how you took a journey forward and make a contribution to the community. Thank you very much. I must always put on record the contribution which our women scientists and all my staff has done during this COVID-19 pandemic. I remember that on 24th March when lockdown happened, and the first people in this office all were my finance staff, administration staff, especially doctors, all women officers and colleagues and various people has come forward and fight for the COVID. So I must acknowledge their contribution on this day, that with their immense contribution and the meticulous planning, we could able to manage this COVID-19 pandemic in our NL as well as in 4PI. So I must acknowledge their contribution. We have a large variety of projects and departments and all, and we have a lot of leadership in the departments and the projects where immense contribution of our women scientists and employees has been taking place. Aircraft that there is research, there is fabrication, there is inspection, there is a simulation, there is a integration, there is a flight testing. So across the thing, I must say that all our women scientists are contributing very well. That is how it, as you rightly said, multitasking is the key of the scientist of women community, and they have extremely came forward and made our things proud to happen in the last many years. So, and I also congratulate all our some awardees which has got 2 awards today, and also we will be facilitating 7 of our employees today who are I can't say that, but who are superannuating shortly. And I would like to proud to say today our entire administration is handled by Mrs. Malika, and she is a woman leader of this particular thing. And also the complete software group today, we write a software which is airborne software as well as the ground application softwares. This is also handled by a woman scientist, Mrs. Jayanti. So she is the heading that department, and apart from, we have a lot of leadership sitting here thing. So I once again welcome all of you and say good wishes for this day, and I once again acknowledge the contribution made by all of our human scientists in National Aerospace Laboratory towards the growth of this laboratory. Once again, I acknowledge both of you to spare your valuable time and given us a extremely inspiring lecture on your journeys, how you started and taken it forward, which has given a great contribution to this nation as well as the community. Thank you very much, and Jai Hind.
This year, we are happy to announce that this committee has taken a new initiation to felicitate women staff who will be retiring from the service during March 2021 and February 2022. I request our director and chairperson to do the honors. Mrs. Manoranjita MD, Senior Technician, ICAS. She has been in NAL since September 1984 to March 2021, but she is not available today. So next is Mrs. Jayanti J. She is the Chief Scientist and heading ASI SD. She has joined NAL in June 1989 and will be superannuating in the month of May 2021.
Thank you.
Mrs. Shailaja Menon, Principal Technical
तो
Officer.
समझ में नहीं आ रहा तू उधर खड़ा रहा था. So I will go this
KTMD.
side.
She is in service since October 1984 to till June 2021. Mrs. Mallika P. Kumar, Controller of Administration. She is in NAL since April 2016 but has served over 41 years in various CSIR labs and will be retiring in July 2021. Mrs. Sharadamma, Assistant Section Officer, Administration. She joined NAL in January 1994 and will be on roll till July 2021. Mrs. Prasanna Kumari KN, Senior Technician 3, ICAST. She will superannuate in the month of December after serving 37 years in NAL. Dr. Amita Rani B, Senior Principal Scientist, Surface Engineering Division, will retire from the service next January. She is joined in CSIR in the month of June 1999. I now request Dr. Lata Shri, Women's Day Celebrations Committee member, to propose the vote of thanks.
Respected Chief Guest of Honor, Director NAL, Dr. Mutkabi, Head 4PI, COA, Mrs. Mallika Kumar, Advisors, M&A and Works and Services, Dr. Bhaumik and Dr. Manju Prasad. Wish you all a very happy International Women's Day. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose the vote of thanks on this occasion. We are fortunate to have Padmashri Professor Sharada Srinivasan from NIAS, Bengaluru, and Dr. Pratibha Jolly, former Principal, Miranda House, New Delhi, with us today. I thank our Chief Guest, Professor Sharada Srinivasan, for her outstanding speech, Journeys Women in Leadership. I thank our Guest of Honor, Dr. Pratibha Jolly, for her excellent speech on woman scientist and entrepreneur nurturing equality. I take this opportunity to thank our director for permitting us to celebrate this event. I thank all our senior lady colleagues who were felicitated today for their participation. I thank the staff members of NAL who have participated in the essay, poetry and cartoon competitions. Further, I thank the judges also of these competitions. I congratulate the Aero Women girl students who have got the merit awards. And my sincere thanks to the Women's Day Celebration Committee members and other colleagues who have contributed directly or indirectly to this event and made it very successful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Happy International Women's Day, Professor Sharada and Professor Jolly. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
Thank
happy
you.
Women's Day to you as
Thank
well.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and all the very best. And I think that you should continue with, your spreading the knowledge of all your great contributions to the wider community, so that we all know. Because sometimes it's only when I've come to occasions like this that I've got to know that there are so many wonderful ladies who are behind, these large organizations like NAL and so on. So I hope you all will also come forth and archive some of your experiences, which I think will be a great inspiration. And perhaps at NIAS, we could, set up a kind of cell whereby we can connect some of these testimonies. And also, I think it's a very important, aspect of the oral histories and the archival knowledge of
Sure.
contributions of women scientists. So we hope to be in touch with you about that as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pratibha, for a wonderful and inspiring talk. Let me say it was so marvelous to hear you. Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
I echo your sentiments, and your suggestions to NAL are fantastic. My thank you as well to Director, sir, and all our women colleagues and friends. I hope this will be a friendship for life, and we can do many things together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Chalo.